Hello, I'm John Graham, and welcome to our 265th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today our panel will discuss if the United States is at a political crossroads where neither party is as interested in the future of the Republic as they are about the next election. Leading off today is Mike Reese, member of the team at Howard Hanna Real Estate and candidate for councilman of First Ward. Then Brian Labaugh, president of R&B Financial Services, followed by Patty Haskins, formerly member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired teacher of mathematics at Wadsworth High School. Mike, do you think that our country's future is at stake because we have lost our way politically?
Yes and no, I guess. I would say that it seems to me that lately, it's become more of a discussion of us versus them rather than what's good for the country. You have both Democrats and Republicans who seem to work tirelessly just to support their party rather than the country as a whole. I know if you watch the news or if you pay attention at all, that there's a lot of fighting. It seems like we can't get anything done in a civil discourse. Candidates spend a lot of time in they're campaigning constantly, which is a problem. You're just elected to be a civil servant. You're supposed to be doing your job, but how can you do your job effectively if you're only worried about your own party and whether they approve you or disapprove you? We've gotten to the point where people, it's just crazy out there. People are who support one party or the other. They just can't even seem to come to any kind of a meeting in the middle. So it definitely has become a problem.
I think it shows itself mostly when there are congressional hearings and people from one party are asking questions of another, and they hardly ever let anybody answer. They have to get their own point across. That's one of the things that it annoys me so much. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I would agree that we have a fundamental problem with just the way people have to campaign. These hearings are more like content creators. They're looking for the gotcha moment instead of trying to really provide oversight. Recently, there was a situation there in Newark. It's been all over the news. I look at that as sort of a content creating moment for those Congress women and the mayor. They're doing their best as far as immigration or whatever the
refresh my memory. In Newark, what was that?
Yeah, what happened was the mayor of Newark, and I believe there was at least two or three Congresswomen.
Oh, yes.
Two women and one man.
Yeah, showed up at a facility that's in Newark. It's a federal facility. It's been a federal facility. I'm not sure if they came unannounced. There's, trying to get through the story there as if they told them they were coming. But they showed up with a crowd of people and the cameras, and they tried to basically force their way in. And that's not going to go well when you have federal, agents there and, ICE and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit of a brouhaha. The mayor was arrested or detained. I think with the congresswomen, were they detained as well?
No, they were prevented from going in, but they were not arrested.
Yeah.
As was the mayor.
Yeah. And that's one of those situations where I think it could have been totally avoided. It's like when several Congress people went down to the holding facility in Texas and had kids in cages and all that kind of stuff. Nobody wants to bring up that, when that facility was put in place, what it's all about. So it makes for good social media content. And that's what's sad about it. I think that because they're in a constant campaigning mode, they have to latch onto an issue and just create content around that so people think that they're actually doing something. And that's where I think we've lost our way. Instead of saying on like a local level, when people are elected, once they get in, it's what's best for Wadsworth. And that's what I think we've lost when we get past the local and state levels. On the federal level, it's basically what's good for my district, how much money can I bring to my district, and I think they forget that they're there representing their district, but it's what's good for the United States.
Yeah, Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, your comment, John, about the hearings and what annoys you, and that annoys me tremendously, but it also annoys me is that the people do not answer the questions in the first place. Unfortunately, the lawmaker who was questioning at one of these committee hearings only has a limited amount of time, 2-3 minutes, and they're asking questions saying yes or no, and then the person that's testifying tends to go on about all kinds of other things and never answer the question and trying to filibuster the time. So it happens on both sides, when they're doing it. The incident that you mentioned, Brian, very honestly, what happened was they showed up, they wanted, the congressional members wanted to, they said they were there for oversight, which they are allowed to do. They should have just let them in. I mean, it would have been a lot less, there wouldn't have been all the pageantry and all of the press afterwards if they'd have just allowed them to go in. I mean, we have congressmen from both sides going down to El Salvador to visit that prison there and having their pictures taken Abu Dhabi style in front of the prisoners. That's all for press, but my big thing is right now is the fact that we have gotten so divided that we now have the fear that if you do not toe the line, if you do not say what the party wants you to say, you are going to be primaried. Particularly in the U.S. House, they only have 2 years for a term. And as Mike understands, when you're running for office, as you do like on local council, 2 years isn't long. They spend, they get elected, and the next day they have to go out and fundraise. And they are required by their party to, after business is done in the House, they go to another room in Congress and they start making phone calls to raise money. And unfortunately, they are told that if they don't toe the line, that we will primary you. Now that's something that I really never heard of. I mean, being primaried, yes, you might have someone that ran against you, but this threat of being primaried and bring in the more conservative or the more liberal person to run against you, I think first raised its ugly head during the Tea Party movement. That's when it really came to a boil. And unfortunately, that is requiring, or it shouldn't because ethics should come into play, but it is making candidates and people that are in office say things that really aren't in the best interest of the country. They're doing what is best to keep their butts in that office and in that seat of power. And that's really disconcerting for me. And I would like to say that it was just Republicans that are doing it because that is where we've seen more of it. But it's happening on the Democratic side as well. I mean, just recently, David Hogg, who is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, he's being challenged in his office due to the fact that he came out and he wanted to get rid of Democrats that weren't, doing certain things. He said, we need to get rid of some of the, it came across as he wanted to get rid of the older candidates, but he really wants to get rid of those that are not useful and those that are not getting things done and those that aren't willing to cooperate. And the Democratic National Committee said, no, in your position, you're not allowed to pick candidates. And so now they're having a re-election. And David Hogg, I'm sure as you're aware, he's actually somebody I respect.
How old is he?
25.
In
Parkland. He was, in case anyone doesn't remember him, he was, it came into prominence due to the Parkland shootings. as he was a student at that high school in Florida during the shootings there, and became an activist against the use of guns and really promoted gun control, and has spent the last 7 years of his life devoted to that. And I think he did a really good job in bringing that problem to the forefront. This, unfortunately, is tending to cripple him, but it's because of this idea that if you're not towing the party line, you're not doing for the good of the party, and therefore forget your values, forget your ethics, forget what's good for the country, and just do as the party said. I mean, I never thought we'd be using the word primary as a verb, but it is now. So
Yeah. Where do you think the media fits into all of this?
well, the media, of course, is divided on sides. I mean, I've told you many times, I watch both right-leaning and left-leaning shows.
You ever watch News Nation?
Yes, I have. And you mentioned that to me. And they tend to be a little more centralized, I think.
Well, that's the way they're billed.
But you have also that's coming into your Newsmax and some of these others that are way off the rails, and unfortunately, people just listen to one. Most Fox News viewers only listen to Fox. Same thing with MSNBC. And if you do that, you are only hearing half of the story.
But more people are getting their news from, I guess, alternate channels in that there's podcasts.
That's true, too. Yeah.
Tucker Carlson has a podcast. He has more subscribers than CNN has viewers. There's Joe Rogan. There's Barry Weiss with Honestly. I mean, the list goes on, and people are getting their news and their information through those sources. I think the media loves it. I think they love getting that rabid congressperson that's just weeping and wailing, and that makes great news. Everybody likes an angry person. They like these kerfuffles. They always send people there. They're always, that's the first call that goes out, I believe, when people are going to do these oversight, or we're going to do a protest, or we're going to lock our arms in front of something. They call up CNN, they call up the local channel. They make sure they're there, because if they're not there, what's the point? So I think the media loves it. I think they love to stir the pot. I try to watch CNN on some of their panels, but I end up pretty much just screaming at the TV. So it's probably not good for my mental health. I try not to watch Fox as much. I am a consumer, and I digest a fair amount of podcasts on a variety of issues. And I seem to think, I believe that the long form podcast gives me more information, more background, more understanding than just that little flash that hits that emotional button.
Isn't it hard, though, to find the true facts? I mean, when this guy says this and this guy says this, who is telling me the truth?
It's very difficult.
Neither one of them in many cases.
It's up to you you have to do your homework.
Well, that's hard to do.
But that's even harder.
You just
to do
can't
these
sit there
days.
and be spoon-fed from a particular source, a channel. Obviously, everybody understands Fox and CNN and MSNBC. You know what you're going to get. But, you do your research, you listen to different things, talk to people that you trust.
Watch C-SPAN.
Well, the news caters to shock value. They love shock value because that's what sells. And and part of the problem is, I think this is a huge problem with both parties, is that we've more and more have catered to the fringes of either side. Mm-hmm. And those are the loudest people. They have the loudest voice, and they're yelling about the issues the loudest. And the news picks up on that and puts those bites out, because they know that that's what gets people's blood going. Yep. And that's a huge problem, because and then you're right, you don't know what's true and what's false. And even if you try to do your own research, you can go online. The internet's a vast source of information, but it's also a vast source of the disinformation. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard to pick what's true and what's false out.
And unfortunately, that mass in the middle are afraid to call out the far left and the far right for just what we're talking about, for fear that they're going to be primaried and thrown out of office. So in order to keep their job, and they'll say, so I can do something for you, although they're not doing anything for us. They managed.
Most people in
just
America
ignore
just
it.
want stability. You know, you want to live your life, you want to, go to work, you want to make your money, you want to have a nice life. And that's what the news also picks up on that, and they scare people because you're like, oh, the sky is falling over here or over here. And most of the people who just want to live a stable life, I mean, that worries them, and that's part of the problem. The media is a huge problem, I think.
Yeah.
Is it just my imagination, or has it always been this way?
I don't. Not back in the 50s and 60s. I mean, even in the 60s.
I would say, just from what I know of history, that yes, it has been this way to some degree.
History is my life, dear, so watch.
Yeah.
It was slower. It was slower because it was a newspaper. I mean, I don't get a newspaper anymore. I get all my stuff online.
Yeah, me
so
too.
the Beacon Journal, the Plain Dealer, I'm not getting that. We don't get the Gazette or anything like that. So, and most people probably don't get their information from a source like that. And so back in the day, it was very slow.
Yeah.
On the news, the Walter Cronkites, no one would ever basically consider Walter Cronkite carrying the water for any particular party.
Right.
Nor Huntley Brinkley.
Or Huntley Brinkley
No.
or all
Douglas
those kind of
Edwards.
stuff. Yeah. So I think it was a slow march towards where we're at right now, where the media is basically, in the thick of it.
Because of ratings.
Now,
Yeah,
newspapers
there's less
always-
journalistic integrity, certainly.
Newspapers always had sides. I mean, it wasn't.
But it was the editorial page.
But it was on the editorial
page, you
and
knew?
they did
Yeah.
have standards that
Yeah.
you don't, you go back and you watch all of the information on Watergate and what the Washington Post did and what they went through to try to get that information out there. And the scandal if they didn't get
Yeah.
it right.
Yeah.
Now you can say, do anything and it's okay. And
They don't check their sources.
News is coming, news is instant now.
Yeah.
You're getting it all day, every day,
Yeah.
and they have to come up with that content all
Right.
day, every day. So it's not like a newspaper where once a day they're putting out, this is what happened, make your own, kind of decisions
Right.
on how you feel about that. Now they're
It's 24/7.
more telling you what you should think
Yeah.
about.
And we can blame Ted Turner, who started CNN,
CNN.
that did the 24-hour news day, and that's where it started. And no one has time to check their sources. They hear something, you hear more and more, my source at the White House said this, and it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's
well,
completely wrong.
You never know who that source is, number one.
You
There's
don't.
all
Yeah.
of these
There could not even be a source.
anonymous source
Right.
or, I hear a lot of people saying, yeah right.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think here's the big question. Where do we go from here?
Elect more Democrats.
I think people need to wake up,
Sorry.
see what's going on. And that's a tough.
People are not going to wake up.
They're not. That's a tough one because how do you get?
Somebody shakes them.
I think the pendulum, I believe in this arc of pendulum swings, and it's going to come back, and people are going to start realizing that we have to start doing our homework, and we need to really to be accountable for, what's out there. We're so far over here. But I believe the pendulum will swing, and we'll get back to some semblance of.
Well, I admire your optimism.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, baby steps. I mean, the whole deal with Trump and this gift of the $400 million plane.
The
from
airplane.
Qatar.
Yeah.
And I saw this morning numerous Republicans have come out and said, we don't think this is a good idea. Even if it's okay, it's just, optics-wise. So at least there's.
But that just burst on the scene. One day you wake up and you find out that a country is giving the 747 stretch to. I thought, where did that come from? I've never even heard about that.
It came from the country that we gave a whole ton of B-52s to.
Yeah. Well, and they've given a lot of money. If you listen to different podcasters, they've sent hundreds of billions of dollars our way in a variety of ways to, soften up opinion about who they are, what they do, what they stand for. I think they just signed a $200 billion contract to purchase 167 Boeing stretch airplanes. So
Yeah.
they got money
They've
to
also
spend.
been a leading
Yeah.
supporter of Hamas, which is
Which
really
is,
interesting.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they got money to spend.
It's it's PR.
Sure.
It's very, very
Sure.
expensive PR.
But,
Yeah.
6 months ago, you would not have heard that many Republicans questioning what the president had said. I mean, you really wouldn't. They all towed the line for fear of being primaried.
Yeah.
At least, I guess there are red lines, and hopefully there are red lines that people and politicians cannot cross.
It seems in years we've been skirting those lines,
Yeah.
A lot of politicians have been, where it's like, okay, this might not be quite constitutional, but we're going to do it anyways. And that's a huge problem. I mean, I believe in the Constitution, and I believe that it's a solid document, and it's a living document. It can be changed slowly
Yes.
over time. But, if you're just completely skirting issues and the things laid out in the Constitution, then what's the whole document worth? If you can just, you know what I mean? It's something that you either follow or you don't, and that's my opinion on that. And lately, it seems like they've not been following it.
It just seems to me like the media is the problem.
They're a huge problem.
It's so polarized. And I don't know how we get out of that without trying to have government interfere with
It gets
free
clicks.
enterprise.
It gets clicks. It gets eyes on, and that's the whole reason behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, why are newspapers dying? Because people that actually read newspapers, ingest the news, digest the news, they're gone.
Yeah.
It's all that 30-second click, 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 and that's what drives these stories. I mean, look at the reels that you can watch, and what's unfortunate is our young people today think that's actual news when it's actually been created, and it's a content.
We're addicted to our devices, and that's another problem.
Yeah.
And they'll feed that addiction. You're on that. I mean, how many people you see are just on the phone? And I'm guilty as anybody else.
Right.
I also think we need to look at who is, or what we call a journalist. I mean, what we're
Yes.
seeing on these 24-hour news stations are not journalists.
It's
They're
entertainment.
TV personalities. I mean, very frankly, some of them that are on there are dumber than rocks. And
Well, you don't have to be smart.
but
You have to be
They look
opinionated.
pretty, and they have great delivery, and we're calling that a journalist. That's not a journalist.
No.
They're just reading all this
They're news
junk.
readers. They're readers.
They're readers, and that's
they present
it.
the news.
And we don't have those investigative journalists like we had in the past. That's the thing that's changed.
Put yourself in the position of somebody who's trying to achieve ratings and make money for the network and all of that. Are they going to go out and really search out news, or are they going to listen to podcasts and all that and just sort of regurgitate what they've already heard? Is there really a chance that we're going to go back to the Huntley-Brinkley days?
I hope so, but
How can we do it?
I'm not very optimistic.
I'm not. No, I'm not
No.
optimistic that we.
I mean, like we were talking about earlier, when we were all growing up, what was news? It was on at 6 o'clock. You watched the news. It was what was going on in the world real briefly.
11
And
o'clock.
I agree. It's all changed when you have these 24-hour news stations because they have to constantly come up with content, no matter what that content is, and it's not always good. And now they've become more opinion-based than actual news, and it's a huge problem.
There's probably not a chance in the world that we're ever going to return to the days where the party that's out of power is the loyal opposition.
We have to recognize there should be a loyal opposition
Absolutely.
first.
Well, there had been in the past. In fact, I remember.
I think what the issue is, though, that that label of loyal opposition has now become just screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
Pick an issue and just beat that dead horse. Instead of in the past, when you had the Ronald Reagans, you had John F. Kennedys, the loyal opposition worked together. They had disagreements, but they were civil about them, and they were able to work it behind the scenes. Now it's all done in front of the camera, and that's one of my biggest contentions. People go, the waves of Donald Trump. The guy makes his sausage in public, whereas before we never saw that. We never saw the Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan going across the table back and forth.
Right.
And getting a law so that everybody, and then they stood out there in the Rose Garden together, arm in arm, and said, this is what's good for the country.
Yeah.
We don't see that anymore.
Now their sole purpose in life is if this party recommends it, we're going to be
Exactly,
against it. To
exactly.
the point where there have been cases where a Republican or Democrat has actually proposed something that was proposed by the other side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now they're going to disagree
Yeah.
with it
Yeah.
because it's the other side.
A lot of them have forgotten they're public servants.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
if they ever knew it in the first place.
Exactly.
I think back to Johnson and Nixon, and as harsh as their campaigns were, once it was done,
It was done.
yes, and I can remember Lyndon Johnson. In fact, when I think of the word, the concept of loyal opposition, I think of Lyndon Johnson. I mean, he no matter what you said about him, he was a statesman, and he stood up and said that he represented the loyal opposition.
He and Kennedy actually were. They did not like each other
No.
either.
No.
Well, that was different. Yeah,
That was a
okay.
whole different thing.
Well, folks, thank you very much for an interesting discussion, and for those who are noticed, Susan is not here. She just happens to be ill, so maybe next time.
Next time.
Our first program will be Stewart again.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.